Good evening. We'll get started. Ms. Chumley will be coming back. I have a script to read before the called meeting begins. Welcome to this called meeting of the Northside Board of Trustees. Before calling this meeting to order, the board would like to take just a moment to briefly review some of the rules for conducting our meeting. The order of business for the meeting is set out in the agenda. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct board business, and for that reason, it is held in public. It is not a public forum, however, we do provide the opportunity for audience participation. If there is anyone who would like to address the board during an agenda item, we ask that you please complete a sign-up sheet located at the entrance to this room. This is so we don't overlook anyone who would like to speak to the board. We will review the rules for addressing the board later in the evening. Is there anyone here who would like to sign up to agenda item and has not done so? Okay, the meeting will then be officially called to order. Please stand as Trustee Medina leads us in the invocation and pledges of allegiance.
Almighty and merciful God, we ask you for your guidance and blessing upon this board, students, patrons, parents, teachers, and administrators as we assemble here this evening in the common pursuit of this great nation's wealth, our children. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Medina. So the first item on the agenda of this called meeting is under facilities. Mr. San Miguel?
Thank you. This particular item needs a little bit of explanation, so I'll make it short and brief. As you may heard, the construction industry is experiencing a very volatile market that has translated to a sizable impact related to various construction commodities, more specifically, the acquisition of construction materials. One such project is being affected by this situation, which is John Jay's Fine Arts facility. Joris was selected as a CM at risk on September of last year and has been working diligently with the project team, which is the architect and the district, closely to review and try to mitigate these construction-related impacts. To that end, the team has developed strategies. Given the volatility of the market, and especially the concerns of the subcontractors not being able to hold their prices for long periods of time, the sooner materials are secured, the better assurance that the materials will be on site when they are needed for installation. Last board meeting, the Board of Trustees approved the amendment number 1 for the first portion of John Jay Fine Arts Facility, which has helped tremendously. We anticipated one more amendment, amendment number 2, which is for the remainder of the project consisting of the major work, finishes, building infrastructure, etc. This amendment was to be scheduled to be presented in the May regular board meeting, which is about 6 weeks away from now. Again, given the volatile market, it is a consensus of the team that we expedite the approval process to gain valuable time. Therefore, before you, we are asking your approval of amendment number 2, the final GMP, based on Joris's 95% review of the project, drawing specifications, estimates for the remaining project. Traditionally, the contractor solicits sub-bids, and the architect and the sub-consultants and the district review such bids and make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. A noteworthy point is that the traditional process I just described will occur. We will review each and every bid before we give the contractor the final approval for that portion of the work. Also, this method is used widely through the construction industry. There is only one caveat to what we're asking. Given the GMP is based on Joris's best estimates and the fact that no one can predict with any level of certainty the current market fluctuations, it is conceivable that there may be an adjustment to the GMP, which we're asking the board to approve tonight. If so, the staff and the architect will evaluate the contractor and make recommendations accordingly. In short, given current challenges with the construction industry, The recommendation before you shortens the approval process, which should have a positive impact on the overall project timing and the cost. So with us today is George Representative Carl McLennan, Mallory Otino, and Wes Ryan, and we also have Jerry Lammers, the project architect, who can assist with answering the questions that you may have.
This, we spoke about this at our last facilities meeting. I can't remember, Melissa, if, Ms. Chumley, if you were there.
No, I was trying to get on, but I've spoken to Mr. San Miguel. Leroy and I talked about it.
Okay, did you have a question?
I had a couple of things. First off, I want to move approval of this. And I commend y'all for bringing it now, because what I keep hearing is things are just going to get worse, and we shouldn't delay. On that, the second part of your statement, though, is so normally when we do the final half of the GMP, it's kind of saying, okay, all the bids are in, we've looked at it, and we're saying this is what it's going to cost. And if it goes over in a change order and comes to us if it's over our set dollar limit, right? Isn't that kind of it's pretty much guaranteeing, y'all are saying,
Guarantee it.
we're going to build this and this is what it's going to cost. And if you don't come in on that, then sometimes that comes out of y'all's side of the pocket. So what we're saying on this, that is different. And that's the only thing that I just want to bring up to the boards, that we all understand that, is that we are saying that we recognize where we are right now, and we're going to approve this because this absolutely is the best thing to do with the way the volatility of the construction industry and building materials right now. But we're leaving you a little bit of leeway there to say we recognize, not knowing what's going to come over the next course of the construction, you may need to come back to us and adjust this. We're not putting a cap on that adjustment. We're just saying that you may need to come back to us.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. Right now, we're doing a final, what we call a final GMP based on estimates.
Right.
And that's the caveat that I mentioned, that if for some reason the market goes even crazier than it is now, that there's an opportunity that we may have to come back and ask for additional funding. Now, it's a double-edged sword. If it goes over, then that's probably what will happen. But let's assume it comes under, then we just capture that particular money and put it in the project and hold it until we finish the entire project.
I don't anticipate that's what's going to happen.
Let's be optimistic.
But I am comfortable, though, Brian. Let me
But we would come back to the board
before
that happened. So it would require an additional board vote before that happened. So I don't, in my mind, this is clearly the best way to handle this odd situation that we're in.
Brian, I completely agree. And what I was going to say is, I'm really comfortable because it's Joris and Alamo that is on this project as well. And we know how you work with us, and you're good partners to us. And I feel confident if you come back to us, you're going to have taken every option that you could find to not have to come back to us, because I know y'all are going to know, even though we're saying this now, that's not going to be a happy meeting. But I do feel really comfortable, though, that it's y'all that we're trusting to do this with. And then the one question I did have, Leroy, and this may be something that we need to take to building committee, is there something in our process that we need to change? Because I know that we talked about when the architect was drawing and we were going to go out to bid and have so that the contractor was part of that process much earlier
That's
than
correct.
what they had been. And I know we've done something,
We actually
but
done that.
I just want to make sure
Right.
that we just take another look at our process to say, is there something else just due to the unique situation we find ourselves in that we need to change?
So one of the things we did on this particular project, it's a CM risk. We only reserve those for the most complex, sizable, and impactful types of projects the district bids out. on a regular basis. And so this one, of course, it fell right into the opportunity for us to get the contractor very early in the stage. Literally, they were there when we were doing schematic design to allow us an opportunity to review the constructability of the project. Should we start here or start there? And that is something that is meaningful for us, especially if a contractor is trying to figure out a best way to get us to the finish line. And so, and what you were talking about, Ms. Chumley, was something that we did about 2 years ago, is bring in the CM at risk contractor before we finish schematic designs. It used to be in
Right,
district, in the
that's what it
district.
was.
It was after we finished schematic design, they used to bring him in. And there was a lot of discussion with the contracting world that it would be more beneficial if we did that, and it has.
Well, I appreciate that y'all are looking at doing this now. It's an odd time we're finding ourselves in, but I know that you'll do everything possible. And then maybe at a later date, we need to come back and talk about, the exterior materials that we're using.
Yeah, that's the other thing we were just talking about is,
I
as
mean,
soon as
we
we
haven't
can.
wanted to do that, but
Right, so the contractor will get the bids, and they'll get them in about, what, 2-3 weeks? About 2 weeks? And as soon as the bids come in, they'll join us in our office, and the architect and ourselves will go through the entire process, and we'll do the same process we do under normal circumstances. And then we agree to move forward with the mason, for example. Soon as that happens, then they will provide the materials to the contractor of the actual brick samples and things, so we can get in colors as soon as possible, because that's a long lead item as well. So there's a little bit more work to be done on all of our part to be able to move the project along quickly.
well, and that was the only thing I wanted to ask Carl on, is I know that y'all, and we can feel confident that y'all are ordering materials as quickly as you can to try to stay ahead of that, the time delays that we're seeing, which I think is something that I really appreciate that y'all are on top of that. And Jerry, I know that you are as well.
For sure. The one thing we are seeing is those dates continue to fluctuate and change from week to week. I mean, you referred to brick. Brick's 10 months right now.
Yeah.
It used to be 3 to 4 months. So, yeah, pretty crazy.
Well, let's hope things get better. Anyway, I move approval.
I second.
Okay, Mr. Blunt?
Yeah, and I'm fine on this. Just a general question for Dr. West, Trustee Freeman, and Mr. San Miguel. Do we potentially need, because of what's going on in construction, do we need to maybe think we may have some more frequent called meetings just to be able to react to something that may be outside the scope of the building committee?
I think that's possible, Mr. Blunt.
Good point.
We'll try to be sensitive of, a couple of months during the summer. Otherwise, when I look out into the future, we've got a called meeting set for May. We will
Okay.
likely need one in June. We'll try to avoid July. We've got 2 or 3 meetings in August. So I think there's going to be at least in the near term, there's going to be ample opportunities literally almost every 2 weeks if we need to react to things quickly.
Good. Thank you.
That's a good point.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the, what are we approving? The amendment to the, where am I? The amendment number 2 for the construction at John Jay High School.
For the total GMP of $45,643,415.
Thank you, Ms. Chumley. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. San Miguel.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Appreciate y'all.
Something I put in my regular one, I always use salt.
Okay, next item on the agenda is under budget review. Dr. Barajas.
Oh, I always defer to Dr. Woods in case he has any
Oh, okay.
opening comments.
Well, I guess I'll say that unlike a normal April called meeting in a non-legislative year, we would bring fairly specific conversation around both growth and improvement and sometimes compensation. That would be a normal thing for us in April. There's still quite a bit of uncertainty around both this year's budget as well as next. Y'all know, and we'll talk briefly about the ADA adjustment that the agency recently released information on. That's a good thing, and Renee will walk through how that works. It does not impact the fifth and sixth cycle, however. And of course, we cannot build a budget for next year in anticipation of any kind of ADA adjustments, right? We've got to make the best assumptions that we can. In addition to that, in the next few weeks, we obviously have a bond proposal that will be in front of our patrons. And the fate of that bond proposal has definite impacts on the general fund. If, for instance, that bond was not passed by our voters, then we would have no choice but to set aside a substantial amount of funds in the general fund to account for things like a chiller that goes down in August, a week before school starts. And so I want to be clear that there's just some uncertainty that's preventing us from making more specific conversation. And so you'll see that tonight when you see this presentation. As back to Mr. Blunt's question, I mentioned we do have a called meeting in May. Our intention is to try to obviously bring you much more specific numbers at that point a month from now. But I just wanted to preview with that. So we will talk both about the current budget as well as future, but wanted you to be aware of that kind of big picture. This is where we are.
Thank you, Dr. Woods.
All right.
All right, we having technical problems? You want to
Thanks.
copy?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Please.
Yes,
Oh, they do, okay.
thank you.
Oh, okay,
We're not gonna show it in our vote?
yeah, okay. All right,
It's not here.
Okay, so we're just going to use,
yeah, so we'll go to the slide number 2, after the introductory slide, to just briefly cover what we're going to cover tonight. As Dr. Woods mentioned, normally at this time of the year, you know, the 21-22 budget or the current year is kind of in the rearview mirror, right? We kind of see where we're going, and we're focusing all the energy on the budget that we're building. But because of the ADA adjustment and all the uncertainty, we'll talk a little bit about 21-22. And then jump into 22-23, talk about growth and improvement, what we currently have and what senior staff has vetted. Talk a little bit about compensation, which is still baking in the oven. We haven't fully decided what is going to be in the compensation plan that the board will consider for approval later. And then kind of talk about the next steps for the 22-23. So the next slide, skip that one, state of the current 21-22 budget. So budget amendment number 2, which was approved by the board in February, if you will remember, we had to go in and make an adjustment to state revenue simply because the numbers that we adopted the budget for 21-22, we were hopeful, crossing our fingers that the ADA, the enrollment would match what we built the budget around. That wasn't the case, so we had to go in and make an adjustment to state revenue, only state revenue, of course, based on average daily attendance. We did not make any other adjustments to like local tax collections, which by the way are coming in at the same rate they have over the last several years. So that was really the gist of budget amendment number 2. At the same time, we also made some adjustments to expenditures by pushing those down, because if we were trending lower than what we expected as far as expenditures, we certainly wanted to recognize that. In addition, and I'll kind of foreshadow this as we see kind of the entire budget amendment number 2, we know that we have $19 million in change of ESSER 2 dollars that we can reclass out of the general fund into ESSER 2 to essentially use up all of the ESSER 2 that we received. So expenditures in the general fund for this year that we're in 21-22 are going to be reduced by about $19 million because we can move those expenditures to a different fund. That's certainly going to help offset the loss of state revenue because of lower ADA and enrollment. And
so Brian, with that movement, are those ESSER funds are going to be moved to pay for things that we've already discussed and approved to use ESSER funds for?
Those ESSER funds are essentially just covering the cost of doing business in the current year. So they're not special projects, they're not new people, they're simply covering existing
They're not the
expenses.
HVAC stuff, they're nothing like that.
None of that.
And the law does allow us to supplant in this case. And normally with a federal dollar, you cannot supplant. So we're going to be able to reduce expenditures by $19 million, which is a great thing for us this year, considering that we're also looking at reduced state revenues.
But it is a one-time adjustment. Let's just, I want us to be clear about that. This isn't recurring dollars, right? That's a one-time adjustment.
And then
So-
will that then use up all of our ESSER funds?
ESSER one and ESSER two will be a thing of the past, and when we refer to ESSER, we're talking about ESSER three, which will continue until 24? 24.
So we'll
September
still-
30th to 24.
So we still have banked funds that if we find something that we want, we need to use them to help from an academic standpoint with kids, we'll be able to do that.
We still have unspent ESSER three funds, yes.
And they're unassigned too. I mean, we haven't.
The vast majority are budgeted.
Yes. If that-
Now, some of them are budgeted in places that, if you felt like you had to, you could move them, right? You could shift those funds.
As long as
But
it
they're
didn't
not-
require an amendment to our application. So it's broad enough that I think the last time I spoke to Ms. Contreras, 170+ million of the 173 had already been allocated to different programs. So it's all accounted for. But whether or not those dollars are being spent right now because having trouble getting people
Staffing.
hired, so then those dollars, as they're freed up, then can be put to other programs should they come about.
Okay, so what happened on that pilot that we were talking about with the microphones? Have we heard anything on that? And we're not allocating additional monies to that?
No, we've actually removed that money now out of the ESSER budget, and we are piloting with 100 teachers across several schools, but we no longer have that large line item that was brought to you earlier this year.
Okay, and that won't come back into ESSER funds without approval by the board?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And we'd bring it back, if we have a proposal to move forward, we'd bring it back through academics into the full board.
Okay, we do want, I think the board does want to know the results on that pilot and what that looks like, too.
We'll have that. We'll run it through the end of the school year.
Okay,
And currently, the reported ADA for the first 4 6-week periods, you can see there from 92.48 all the way down to the fourth 6 weeks, which is 89.32. That's important in relation to the ADA adjustment we're going to talk about. There is the fifth 6 weeks, which ends, I believe, this Friday, is trending at about 92%. And who knows what the 6 weeks is going to have in store for us.
And that goes back to that point I made about the ADA adjustment that the agency is talking about is the first 4 cycles only, period. It does not adjust cycles 5 and 6 at all, nor does it obviously speak to anything going forward. So again, the ADA adjustment is a good thing, but it's a defined period of time.
and Brian, did they not specify that when they originally came out? Because I remember reading a notice about it, and I didn't think there was anything in there that specifically said they were limiting it.
It's very clearly limited.
Okay. But they didn't say that at the beginning, I don't think.
Okay, next slide, please. So, state of the current budget. So what you have here is the current budget after amendment number 2. If you look at what we did, going back to amendment number 1 in November, we adjusted the budget, which went to a deficit of $46 million, taking into account a loss of state revenue after we could somewhat determine where we think we may be trending. And this was back when we thought that they were just going to do that first ADA adjustment for the first 6-week period, I believe, and adjusting for lower expenditures where we were trending, we got back to basically the same spot at $46.8 million. So that's where we currently sit. Off to the right, you see kind of some footnotes about what we did for budget amendment number 2. Now we're talking about what we are going to do with budget amendment number 3, which traditionally in this district is taken to the board in August for approval. It's kind of the last hurrah for that particular budget to shore up revenues and expenditures. But because of this particular ADA adjustment, we are now going through the process of seeing where do we move the pendulum back as far as state revenue. Because, again, we thought we were on our own for almost the entire year. Now that 4 6-week periods are going to be adjusted, well, we have to go through some calculations to say, well, what does this actually mean for us? We already know what the ADA percentage that the state has assigned to us is going to be. So we have to do some calculations to then say to the superintendent, we think that we're going to get this much back in state revenue. Do we want to bring this to the board for a budget amendment, or do we want to just ride this all the way to August the way we traditionally have done? So, and again, it does reference the $19.9 million of ESSER 2 that we're going to be able to clean the slate with and reduce general fund expenditures this year by that dollar amount. Again, one time, that's it, we're done with ESSER 2. So next slide is just kind of the state of the current budget. This is something we started tracking a few years ago in changing our methodology about what we were actually tracking. So because 2/3 of our general fund revenue comes from local taxpayers, we spend a little bit more time looking at, are we trending where we need to be as far as, the taxes that are being collected? And sure enough, year after year, you can see that all the way through the end of, this is actually through the end of March, tax collections, both debt service and INS, you can tell that all those lines are having a little party at the end. They're right on top of each other. Over the last several years, we are always collecting taxes at about the same level, so there's no issue there. So again, that's a good thing. If we were looking at lower tax collections because of what's happening in the greater economy, then we'd be looking at not only state revenues, but also local tax collections. So we do look at this every month. We track it just to make sure there's not a problem there. Next slide, please. So here we are talking about TPAR, another acronym. Targeted, what was it again? TPAR? Attendance rate, yeah. I'm kind of acronymed out after all this. Remember Asahi and Lohi and all that stuff? So basically what it comes down to, as Dr. Woods alluded to, is that the state said, okay, here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to go back to the attendance rate you had in 1920, okay? And that is 94.75%. And we are going to give you that ADA percentage on whatever enrollment/membership you have, and that's what you get to use for the first 4 6-week periods. So 94.75 is what has been assigned to us. We verified that's what indeed we reported to TEA back in 1920. Now that is higher than where we are currently trending. If you go back a couple of slides, it was in the 92,
92.
89, 8. So anyway, that is definitely going to help us. What we have to do now is go in and after the first 4 6 weeks are done, we have to apply that 94.75 to what was our average daily membership during that time period to get that component of our refined ADA. And then 6-week periods 5 and 6, we are on our own. So you have to do a blending of, I shudder to use the word hold harmless because they don't want to call it that because they're precluded from giving us a hold harmless. So the TEA, the ADA adjustment has to be blended with our own ADA for the 5th and 6th-week periods, put that together, and then say, this is where we think we're going to end the year, run the numbers, run the template, and then give an estimate about how we think we're going to end the year. So
Okay, Renee, I'm sorry, can you explain that? So I thought we said that we're not going to have a hold harmless for the 5th and 6th, so then why are we blending
well, because
anything?
you have to, because they're only going to give you this ADA adjustment for the first
For the
4
first
6-week
4,
periods.
right.
So we're going to get an
Oh.
elevated average daily attendance for that time period. But
Okay.
then the state pays you based on the entire year. So 6-week periods 5 and 6 are
Okay,
on their
I didn't
own.
realize the state pays us for the entire year at one
Yeah,
time.
yeah, of course, yeah. They do every year, but this kind, they're
I
giving us
thought
an
that
adjustment.
they did it on a, not monthly, but a 6-week time period or something.
Well,
I didn't, so they give us a lump sum.
No. We are a payment class 3 district, which means we get 45% of our state money, FSP, Foundation School Program, in September. We get 35% in October, and then we don't get the final payment until August because
Okay, so- and
We-
that
yeah.
explains it, I understand
Right.
now. I just wasn't, I was figuring we were paid every 6 weeks, and so I didn't see why it would be blended for the
No.
last 2.
well, I mean, that's just so when are we going to settle up with the state? Well, you don't settle up with the state till about a year later, right? So everything that we're doing now is based on an estimate of we're crossing our fingers and hoping that will we trend 92% ADA in 6-week periods 5 and 6? I think
Let's hope.
we don't know. So we may push that down a little bit just to give us a little breathing room so we don't over budget from a revenue perspective. But those are some conversations we'll have to have, present to the superintendent to say, we feel good about this number, let's go ahead and go with it. And then, again, cross your fingers and hope that our ADA doesn't trend much lower in the last 6-week period, so.
Dr. Barajas, how much does that say approximately 2%? It's a little over 2%. How much does that mean to us?
Oh, what was it?
Approximately, just rough.
Didn't we do that calculation?
We did.
7 million?
Yeah, each 1% is $7 million
$7 million.
in state funding.
Okay.
So, they're large round numbers, but we want to be a bit more precise when we do the calculations, because remember, this is only on refined ADA. That is the main driver of your funding, because that essentially, if you know the term basic allotment, $6,160, right? That's what really is driving most of the money. But there are other ADAs and FTEs, mainstream ADA, full-time equivalents for all these different kind of instructional arrangements that we also have to factor into the template, which then generates the total amount of money that the state is saying you are entitled to. So we have to go through that calculation. So we're as close as possible without, having a $8 million swing one way or the other, so.
But from a rough, if you assume we're about 2.5% below where we would have been pre-COVID, that's 17.5 or $18 million.
Yeah.
I mean, just in, rough terms, that's, we're talking about real impact there.
So in times like these, as I like to tell legislators, that's why we have fund balance, because there are things you just don't know. There are unknowns out there, and you want to have those resources to be able to dip into should you have this kind of situation we have over the last, it seems, 2 years. So next slide, please, or 2 slides. So enough about 21, 22, right? It's living, it's breathing, we're making adjustments, and we're trying to do what we can. But at the same time, we're also building next year's budget, 22, 23. So a little bit about compressed tax rates. 1920 was the first year that this new way of funding came in, and we all had a compressed rate that went down to 93 cents, and then we got to have 4 pennies, so on and so forth. And every year, the state has their own compression. This year, the state has already said their compressed tax rate at the state level is going down to 8,941. Okay, great. So you put that on the shelf and say, okay, but what is our MCR going to be? Well, our maximum compressed rate is going to be lower than what our current MCR is right now, which is lower than 8,941. It's 8,758. And remember, the compression of your M&O rate is all predicated on the increase in property values in your district. And as we've all seen, if you've opened up your appraisal, the appraisals are quite high. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means then that I think that certain things in life that are certain death taxes and our M&O rate is going to go down, because we have seen that the appraisal values are extremely high, which means that our property values are going to go up, which means that our MCR is going to go down. By how much, we don't know. There is no mechanism yet that's been developed by any of the consultants we have to say, well, for every 5% increase in property values, you can expect a penny reduction in your MCR. If there is, I've not seen it, but I wish there was some kind of gauge to say for every 7.5% increase, it's 1.5 pennies. So we just have to wait, unfortunately, until July when we get our certified values to take those values, drop them into the MCR calculator to know what our MCR is going to be. And then on top of that, the district is allowed to add 5 pennies on top of that.
But what is crystal clear is that we would have compressed anyway, and given what we hear anecdotally and through some actual data around what's going on, not just in Northside, but across the county with regard to reevaluation of properties, it's going to compress. We will present to the board over the summer, and then finally for action in August, a M&O tax rate lower than the one that we have.
I really wish we knew what that was going to be at this particular point.
So do we.
So yes, but the state essentially knows right now where the values are going. I mean, for the most part. So what's keeping them? Is it because we haven't gone through the process of the people challenging their valuations? Is that what's keeping the state from?
That's a reason, but the other thing to recall is that in the urban counties, there's some level of sophistication to get these out in a reasonable time. Lots of counties in Texas, I suspect, it will be a while before they're ready to send out appraisal notices. And so, remember, they've got to look at everything, right, statewide. But then you will see in a year in which values go up substantially, like this one, that there will be more appeals to those values than there are in a normal year. I think recently we saw the highest ever. We were having this conversation.
Last year, the amount, so when you get your certified values, what you get is ARB approved, which if you didn't protest your values, that's what you get. For those that go in and protest, it goes under ARB review, so you get 2 numbers. So for instance, last year there was about $5 billion at what was under ARB review. So you're looking at that number and thinking, okay, this is kind of in limbo. How much of that is actually going to go onto our certified rolls? You have to make an estimate, because if you look at that $5 billion that people are protesting, Is $4 billion going to come onto the rolls? Are they going to knock off $1 billion? You just don't know, so you have to make an educated guess. And we use a state funding consultant whose modeling has been very good over the last couple of years to say how much of that's under protest is going to come off protest because it was either successful or not successful, and come onto the rolls that we can tax on. So that's what we have to go through every year. Last year it was $5 billion. Year before that it was only $1 billion. I suspect this year it's going to certainly eclipse
be
$5
higher.
billion. But we'll see. But again, we don't know until we know, because unlike in other districts where I've worked in Harris County and Dallas County, March, April, May, June, you're getting estimates of your values. So you're kind of gauging it. But here, I believe we don't get any kind of update from BCAT to kind of tell us where we're trending. So we're sitting on our hands until July when we finally get those certified values. At the time, we've already built a budget around an estimate of what our MCR is going to be. So there's some maneuvering that has to happen during the late July. At the same time, we're trying to get the board to approve the notice that's going to go in the newspaper. You call for the public hearing. So there's a lot of things that are happening, but that's the way House Bill 3 is working. And unfortunately, we just have to wait until we get certified values to be able to know what our MCR is going to be, maximum compressed tax rate, M&O rate.
Yeah,
Okay,
there will
so-
be substantial appraisal challenges this
Oh,
spring.
huge.
Yeah.
The neighborhood things are, but Brian and Renee, so walk me through this very basic layman, please. So if we have the MCR, we lower our tax rate on the property appraisal that we all have received, it shows what our new tax rate, our new tax is going to be. So if we have this compressed, does that mean, where we're lowering it, does that mean that that's going to be an impact on that amount of tax that we're being told is what we're going to be paying now on our new appraised values?
Well, the appraisals that everybody received has the current taxes for all those taxing jurisdictions, right? They don't know what Northside's tax rate's going to be. We don't know what our tax rate's going to be because of the M&O component. So this is a question that Ms. Freeman and I were talking about. So when you open up the appraised value,
That
there is
helps.
an existing tax rate, but
And-
that's this year's tax rate, but you're gonna be paying taxes next year on that appraised value. So when it says estimated tax, that's based on current tax
That's
rates.
based on current tax
Right.
rates, but just at the higher appraised value of the property.
On what, unless you protest and get that number lower. In fact, there's two places on
So
there where
that
it
number
says.
could actually be worse.
Well, no, if you got, well, the 10% limit, in this case, if you looked at the estimated tax, any taxpayer and saw that, more than likely, that amount is gonna go down but if all things being equal, because they already have your new appraised value, right? So it's at the higher appraised value.
Right.
But the tax rates, at least for NISD,
stuck.
is
Yeah,
gonna
I
go
mean-
down because we just talked about MCR. So in essence,
And so it will come down.
the
That's-
line item that says
Right.
NISD taxes is gonna go down because we know that our M&O rate is going to go down.
Okay, because that's where, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So that value, that tax number that's sitting there right now, based on my higher property
On the appraisal
appraisals,
notice, yeah.
but it's based on what the current tax
correct.
rate is for all of those entities, including us.
That's correct.
So if ours goes down, then
And it
when
will.
that,
We know that it
Will.
will.
we know it's gonna go
Will.
down. I wish we knew that too, because that would be very helpful with the bond conversation. But, so, okay, so that helps. So we know it's gonna go down, so the north side piece of that, but then we don't know what the others are gonna do.
So
The other taxes are gonna do.
if anybody was so inclined after they, got up off the floor after seeing that 31% increase, you'll notice that they said, by the way, this is the last year we're gonna show the tax rates. Because next year's appraisals, we're not gonna show any tax rate from any of the taxing jurisdictions. All we're gonna tell you is what we are appraising your property. Because there's this new online tax portal that every county in the state has to have, where I have to go in and add what our tax rate is going to be. That way you can go to that portal, any taxpayer can go to the portal and look at it there. Because what I believe the appraisal district didn't want to do is they wanted to separate themselves from we don't set the tax rate. We only do the appraisals, right? It's clear, like, hey, all those taxing jurisdictions, that's their thing. We just appraise it. So they're going to this new system. So next year, nobody will see an estimated tax. You have to go now to a portal to figure out what your estimated
And
tax
so
is
if
going to
I'm
be.
80 years old and not understanding all of this to start with, I'm really gonna,
You
wanna
may be
go do
calling the
that.
school district and asking, what is this new thing? And we'll try to help them as much as we can.
They'll
So,
call their neighborhood trustee.
there you
There you
go,
go.
there you go.
You become a
Thank you
property tax
for-
expert.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for
That'll be my
explaining
first
that.
question. Who's your trustee? Here's their number. Please call. Okay, so next slide is compensation. As Dr. Woods alluded to, we're going to kind of cover some things that are kind of, in the as we're developing what the comp plan is going to be that we'll bring to the board for approval. If you remember back in September, we increased the sub pay. That's going to continue, or plan to continue for 22-23. Mrs. Hill presented that information to the board simply because we were trying to entice subs to come into the district. We're going to continue that rate going into next year. There will be some market salary adjustments and some reclassifications and some stipend adjustments. Next slide, please. Just giving you a little,
Are the stipend adjustments based on market
They
as
are.
well?
Absolutely. And all of those adjustments are based on market,
Okay.
including the sub rates for that matter.
Well, but that's hard for us to compete against what SAISD is doing right now on sub rates.
There are things that one can afford and there are things that one cannot.
so just looking at the last 3 years of compensation in 1920, there was a 4% average increase given to employees on the hiring schedule, rather, and then the midpoint increase at that time, including auxiliary, was at 3%. The good old days, I guess. 2021, that was the year that we gave no general increase, but the board adopted the budget at that time, reserving the right to give some kind of mid-year adjustment, which we did, which was equal to 1% on the midpoint for most employees. Then the year we currently are in, a 3% average increase as we calculated it for essentially teachers and others on those hiring schedules. The general midpoint increase was 3%. There were certain classes in auxiliary that were given a 3.5% increase on the midpoint. And then using ESSER funds, there was the $1,000 retention payment that we made in March, the Friday before spring break. Continuing with what's in growth and improvement, the new elementary startup for the elementary that's opening up this year, right?
No.
No, next year, I'm sorry. So that, the year before it opens up, there are costs associated with getting ready for that new campus, which I believe will be named tonight. And then, of course, the new high school, well, it's coming online this August, so there are certain costs associated with that. Staff, for instance, to staff the new high school that are included in growth and improvement. And of course, the board members who have been on the board for a length of time, you've seen this before because the district has been opening up so many different campuses with different bond issues. A couple of other initiatives I think that I've seen, at least since I've been here, and so as a board, about expansion of the STEM labs, that's continuing, and kindergarten instructional materials refurbishment. Next slide. So campus-based units, or CBUs as we call them, I think I'm the only one who calls them that. Through the G&I process, there are all these different units that are accounted for, whether it's coming from the new schools or whether people are just asking for additional resources to assist with different instructional programs or the needs of the children. And so that represents 100.81 FTEs for campus-based units, and I believe on the 26th, Dr. Woods, this will be brought before the board for approval, so HR can get started on hiring these particular CBUs.
Yeah, that's correct. So we do want to follow that traditional timeline because it's so important, especially in the current hiring environment for professional educators, that we get out there and be ready to hire. Some of these positions are quite challenging to hire in the best of circumstances, right? Things like special education teachers, career and technology teachers, newcomer teachers. Those folks are really hard to find, and you can see there's kind of a theme in what these units are proposed for. There will also obviously be positions added going back to the STEM lab expansion, right? Because that takes a full-time teacher to do on the remaining campuses that we will finish out, that initiative will be finished out next year. So this item will be brought to the board for consideration in 2 weeks, again, because of the hiring timeline, especially given the circumstances that we're in.
Will any of the decisions in relation to fine arts on the elementaries, or actually all levels, will any of those all be made at that time to be included in this?
Well, those aren't new units, so that's a separate process. These are specifically units we're asking the board for approval for because they're new to the budget. They have not existed prior to this. Those units are existing ones.
But Brian, if we have an existing unit that's now going to be, so if I have 2 units right now, one at 2 elementary schools, and now I'm going to have one that's going to go between the 2 elementary schools, then that means we've lost a unit.
That's correct.
And so where is that going to be factored into the budget?
That'll get included, when you see the overall budget, it includes obviously the compensation and benefits costs for every staff member, every employee. So we will collapse a handful of units via that process. So essentially they'll go away or they'll go to something else, right? They'll just transfer to something else.
And it's not really in this, but I would like to know where we can have the discussion in relation to that. Would that be something, if we want to have the discussion of in relation to that, when and where would that be appropriate to have?
You could have it at a committee meeting, or you could obviously put it on an agenda. The board has a staffing policy, and obviously even during COVID, we tried not to make substantial adjustments to the staffing policy.
So if the board wanted to review the staffing policy in the event of changes that we have seen due to COVID, actually impacts COVID and other circumstances are creating, would that go to an academics or would that go to a policy?
Policy.
Okay. And you're saying that within 2 weeks, we're going to have this, but this is all new. So when will we have that budget that includes those types of changes?
Late summer.
Late summer? So we have time then to have that go to policy in the next 30 days?
You do. I would caution the group that pretty far along in the budget development process, substantially changing the policy such that the numbers of teachers per X student will have a budget impact, one way or the other, right?
So I guess that's what I'm asking, because I was not aware of that, the situation or the impact or the things that were driving it. And so I would like to have the board have the discussion in relation to that. So I guess that's what I'm asking, is what is the urgency in relation to that, in relation to the formation of the budget?
There's some urgency from a timeline standpoint.
Okay, so I'll get with Karen in relation to the policy committee and see when that's going to be called and get that on there. So it would be helpful to have it before the last meeting in April?
It's not necessary to have before that meeting. The only thing we will bring that's budget related at the regular meeting in April is this.
The new positions?
Correct.
Okay.
Oops,
Dr. Harrell?
thank you, sorry, I've been pushing my
No,
button.
that's okay.
I'm
Okay.
sorry,
I-
Carol.
That's okay.
I was jumping.
That's okay. So I think I need a white thing. I think I just spilled it on my microphone. Hang on. No, and you may have answered already, Dr. Woods. I was looking, these are FTEs, right? So when we were at academics, we were also talking about looking at increased supports for our students. I see for their social, emotional, and mental health, right? So middle school counselors, possibly increasing communities and school support. That's not FTEs though, right?
It wouldn't be.
But would it be in the G&I?
Yeah, some of what you'll see in the growth, in the overall growth and improvement will be tied to the area that you're talking about, but those aren't campus-based units, so that's why you don't see them listed.
So where it says middle school counselors, thank you, Monica, I'm sorry. My coat got most of it, but I'm waiting for it to shock. Sorry, don't. I'll hold you, we'll go together. So I see middle school counselors, I'm just wondering why middle school, why not high school? Or, you know, some of the data is real scary with high school right now. And why not elementary? Why just middle school? That's my question.
We've traditionally split counselors at middle school and have been trying in the last couple of years to
Gotcha.
get away from that, and so that's this effort, essentially.
Okay, so not splitting middle school counselors.
Yeah, it's pretty tough to have two different caseloads that you only get to see
I'd like to see numbers.
every other day, right?
Gotcha. No, I gotcha. So would there be later on more opportunities to see more of that
Why would it be?
support that we talked about? I'm trying to think if we umbrellaed it under a term, but mental health support, social emotional support.
That we'll plan to bring a detailed growth and improvement at that called meeting in
Okay,
May.
okay, just checking.
But I'll say, there are not gonna be a lot of recommendations in that front. A lot, and we didn't even consider some.
Okay.
Even if the currently senior staffed blessed projects were to all come to the board, it will be a large number,
Yeah.
very large number. And given the kind of overall budget situation that we've been talking about in both February and this month, it's just the reality of our situation. So the only thing we'll bring in 2 weeks is the campus-based new units, again, for hiring purposes.
And you see the number at the very top where it says 100.81?
Yes.
It's actually going to be 182.81, because if you go back a slide, Monica, you see where it says new school base, and it says Sotomayor. You see the 80 FTEs there? And then underneath it, you see Jones Magnet and Zachary Magnet 2. So that's 82 plus the other campus-based units. So that's the grand total that you will be considering next week. I didn't want to confuse the board to say, wait a minute, last week we saw 100 and now it's 182. Well, because they're not added together on one sheet. They're broken out between Sotomayor, the Magnet, and then other campus-based units.
We had always done that where we broke out what was strictly new school
Correct.
first.
Okay, Dr. Harrell?
No, I'm sorry, that was it.
Oh, okay. Mr. Lopez?
No, my question was answered already. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next slide, please. So moving into employee benefits, specifically health insurance. Okay, well, we are currently with Purchase Insurance. We have United Healthcare. And what administration is working on is to move forward with Purchase Insurance for our plan year 2023, which begins in January of 2023. Annual premium, about $90 million, that not only does the district contribute to, but also employees through their premiums that they pay for their health insurance. Currently, we have 6 plans and a pharmacy plan, and things will remain almost the same for next year, because we are predicting, and we have been told, that in order for us to fully fund our plan, essentially with a premium increase, we're going to need about another $5.4 million for the plan and premium increases, right? We had a 2-year rate guarantee, so no employee has paid more in health insurance for the last 2 plan years, 21 and 22. We knew that more than likely that United Healthcare was not going to go one more year without a rate increase, but through the company that we selected to be our health insurance consultant, they were able to get them down from a 12% increase down to something below 10. And I think that's where we're going to settle. So if you go to the next slide, for plan year 23, you can see that it went from 12.9%, they whittled it down to 5.9%. So we're looking at, and we haven't made this decision yet, about how are we going to distribute that additional premium cost of $5.4 million between the district and employees. So that's something that Benefits is working, and HR is working through to come up, and our consultant as well, to come up with what does the premium cost for 2023 look like.
So here's another impact to the budget. that we'll have to account for, really regardless of how we decide to distribute that cost.
So next
So
slide, please.
Renee, real quick, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we will end our 2-year contract with our current carrier, right,
In December.
in December? And do we still have that option available to go into self-funded? Are we looking at that? Is that still one of our options?
It's on the next slide,
As,
Yeah.
coming up.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
So, based on the timeline for us to be able to go to be self-funded, self-insured, it's already April, and there's a lot of legwork that would have to happen for us to get there. So currently, we have made a decision to go ahead and, as I said, go with purchase insurance for 1 more year, and get ready from today all the way till the end of the end of 2023 to get ready to enter to be self-insured in plan year 24 and beyond. As you see, the anticipated conversion is January 1st of 2024. There simply isn't enough time for us to do all the things necessary to go out and build the plans, go out and solicit proposals from a particular carrier who wants to come and work with us. A lot of stuff has to happen, and we don't think that we have enough time between now and an open enrollment would happen sometime in October or November of this year. So we made a decision, administration made a decision that it was in the best interest of the district to move forward with 1 more year with United Healthcare with purchase insurance. The analysis that has been provided to us by McGriff, the new company we're working with, does suggest that it would be beneficial for a group our size to become self-funded. So that is what kind of tipped us into that, let's go ahead and start to explore it for plan year 2024. So I think it was last week, or maybe it was this week, when we saw the numbers, and they are, again, pushing us into that area where we think that we could benefit by becoming self-insured. But again, it's something that takes a lot of care and feeding, and rather than try to jump into it and get ready for plan year 2023, we want to take our time and do it right.
Ms. Chumley?
Do we know, because we've been talking about, asking about looking at a self-funded program for a while. So Renee, is there something that has changed in the marketplace that makes it more doable now than it did 2 years ago or 4 years ago when this conversation first started? Because I know there was that change that the legislature had in relation to TRS medical.
Yeah, but that doesn't impact us.
No, so what?
I don't think it's a change in the market. We've had 3 different analysis done of what would be the potential financial benefit, right? Because that's the obvious question. Because when you self-fund your insurance program, you take on risk, right?
Right.
That we're obviously paying somebody else to take on now. And so we've had 3 separate analyses. We're satisfied now that if the board says to us, are we pretty darn sure that this is a way to save dollars in the budget? The answer is going to be yes. Now, again, we take on additional risk, and so there could be an aberrant year, right, where that wasn't the case. But we feel like we're in a situation where we could afford to take that risk on. We feel like it will benefit the budget, and it will free up dollars, frankly, to use for all kinds of other things, whatever the board wants, whether it's positions or compensation or whatever, right? It would free up dollars that are currently being used for health insurance. The issue is, in order to maximize those savings and to provide the best plan to employees, takes a tremendous amount of design, right? Takes a lot of design work. And could we cobble something together off the shelf and offer it as self-funding in 2023? Probably so. But it wouldn't be what we wanted. And so the reason we wanted to have this conversation tonight is just to kind of say, here's where we think we are. We feel pretty good about self-funding and the decision to move forward with self-funding. But we want to get the plan design done correctly. We're going to have to put out a substantial RFP for this work that will take quite a while to create. And only then will we be able to talk much more specifically and to talk potential savings more specifically. But what we wanted to say to the board is later this spring, we will bring a recommendation to renew with the current carrier for 1 year at the 5.9, I think it was, percent increase over what we've had the last two. There will be a budget impact from that, clearly, even if all the district does is cover the 70% that we currently cover of the health insurance costs. That's a substantial number. So, and then you will hear more and more about the meat of self-funding as we go into the second half of this year and obviously into the first half of next year.
You know, one thing, so before I retired, one of the members that I worked with self-funded his company, and he had offered the information and the gentleman that he had handle all of that. So I'll get that to y'all
Yeah.
too. But one thing that did go hand in hand with that was a better employee wellness program. That went hand in hand with the self-funded medical program. And so I see we've got the continuity of Simply Engaged Wellness Program. So I think, Brian, it would benefit us to look at what our wellness program does when we're looking at the self-funding piece too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a big part of any health program, right? So yeah, that'll all be done. We'll survey folks on that. We'll have to put together a health insurance task force to help us with some of those kinds of things. So there's a lot to be done.
Well, I know that our benefits area, though, has, and COVID hit them when they were really moving with some great ideas to bring forward about our wellness program. So maybe we could get back
Yeah, I don't think
on track with what they were talking about.
There's really two separate things under the heading of wellness. There's what you get with regard to health insurance, right? But then there's also, we have an internal wellness, right? That's a separate person, works for Northside and all of that. So there's a couple of things going on there. But we actually like some of the aspects of the plan that we have, but we'll redesign the wellness plan as well, again, to try to get best price, best service for our staff.
Well, and maybe look at a little bit of what corporate America does do, because I think there are some companies out there that do their wellness programs very well, and it might not be bad to look at what they're doing, and even if it's just the technology that they use to be able to engage their employees
All that can be considered.
in that. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Harrell.
No, thank you. My question was already answered.
Okay. So a lot to look, I know anytime, certainly the cost of health insurance eats up a family's budget really quick. And so any opportunity we have to look at savings, I think is really good. I also know, though, that some of our self-funded entities do have very narrow networks. And so sometimes there's a trade-off. And so as we go forward with the exploration of these, of the plan, whatever it is that we think we're going to be able to offer in a self-funded program, we need to be sure that our employees are with us, because it could narrow the options that they have for healthcare providers.
It could, if that were the only way to generate savings, because that's obviously why people move in that direction. I've already told the consultant that I want in the, just kind of at the 10,000 foot level as they're thinking about designing, that we're going to want to offer some range of products to our customer, our employee base, and of course their families. From a model that's very rich and very likely very expensive, down to something that's appropriate for a 20 or 22-year-old employee who's doesn't have health insurance or doesn't have health issues and can afford to pay very little, right? And is willing to accept a narrow network, for what they're paying.
Ms. Chumley, another
So
question?
would that, Brian, would that include, because I know with this one self-funded group that I'm thinking of, he actually went out and negotiated with doctors. He pulled all of the prices of every surgery with all of the hospitals in San Antonio, and then went out and negotiated directly with doctors. And so it was like he had his own contract. So is that kind of what
Yeah,
we're,
you can.
what we're looking
You
at?
can design at that level of granularity. In some cases, that would be in your best interest, and some it wouldn't. But you can do that. It's one of the great benefits of self-funding that offsets some of the risk, is you have complete say over what the plan looks like. Again,
And so we're going to
the
be,
reason we're not doing this in 2023 is there's no way to do that between now and then.
no,
That can only be done over a period of time, bringing in some expertise and so forth.
but we're going to be instructing our consultant to look at other variables
That's correct.
in relation to this.
Yeah, that's why they've been told 2023 is not what we're going to do, because we don't want an off-the-shelf product. We want something specifically designed for us.
Okay.
I mean, you can get anything you want as long as you're willing to pay for it, and that's what we have to decide is, and they're the experts as far as building plans and listening to us and saying, what is it you want? And as Dr. Woods pointed out, we're not going to just accept what it is they bring to us, because it's our plan. We have to develop it, and we have to make sure that there's not as much there's not impact to employees, because people who regularly use health insurance want to make sure, can I use the same doctor? That's always the first question. I've been seeing the same doctor for 10 years, and all those other kinds of issues. So it's going to take a while for us to go through this. So.
Special medications.
Exactly.
On this plan too, Renee, and I know we're talking about in 2024, and we're talking about design, is there opportunity for the employees to be a part of this discussion as well? Trying to get them and say, hey, what worked for you? What didn't work for you?
Well, the next slide, Monica, if you see over,
I did it again.
does say formulation
Yeah.
of a benefit task force. So without a doubt, I think that our benefits group is going to go through and find out from employees, what they're looking at. Now, of course, everybody's going to say free health insurance. That's what I want. Well, of course, we can't do that. But yes, so that's why it's going to take so long for us to go through, because this is, after their paycheck, this is the second most vital thing that employees come to work for. So, you have to kind of treat this with kid gloves and take your time to do it, which is why, as Dr. Woods alluded to, yes, we can take something that they put together for us and roll it out, and nobody would be happy because it wouldn't be what they want. So we're going to take our time in developing this.
Well, thank you very much, Renee, because I also wanted to say, I think this is a great opportunity, and I always see this as I see this as a way for us as a district to be able to promote ourselves and another way of recruiting by saying, hey, we've got a great plan that's going to fit you and your family. That's just another tool for us as a district to bring in the best. That's the way I've always seen it. So thank you.
Unfortunately, in my years in schools, everybody who comes into whatever district I'm working in always thinks that where they were, the health insurance is better. The grass is always greener somewhere else. And when they leave here, they think, oh, Northside's health insurance is so great. So that's just the way it works. So, but we have 10,000 employees who are on our plan. I forget the number of covered lives, 19,000. 19,000. So this is important, and this is something this administration is not going to take lightly, because again, am I going to get a raise? Great. What's my health insurance going to cost? Those are always the questions we get. So. And the last is just to cover what we have left between now and August. Well, certainly we have the April 26th meeting where the board will consider for approval the campus-based units. In May, we have, May 17th, I believe, we have another called session for us to discuss yet again the perhaps 21-22 budget and 22-23 where we are. And then into June, it's already going to be summer. We have some other things that the board will consider for approval. The potential approval of a compensation plan. It's on the calendar, but again, it's up to Dr. Woods whether or not he feels it's baked enough for us to bring it to the board. Approval of the remaining G&I packages. Depending what happens in early May, there may be some things that are pulled out, and we just don't know. And then, again, approval of non-campus-based units. And we started this last year because if we went through the trouble of having the board approve campus-based units, we might as well have the board approve non-campus-based units. And we'll probably cover that at the fourth budget review work session, once we narrow that down to how many non-campus-based units that we're asking the board to approve. And then finally, we get to August, which is very procedural. All of a sudden, we're having the board approve the notice, calling for the public hearing, and doing all the things that we have to get the budget properly and appropriately approved by the board.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Barajas. Just one thing that I've noticed in the last week or so, there are a number of districts across the state who are operating currently at a budget deficit. And they're looking in their budget process right now, they're looking at no growth and improvement. They're looking at freezes in employment. They're not replacing people that leave. And I think we're not there. We're in a good place. We've got a number of uncertainties, but I think we're still relatively healthy. And so I appreciate this board and the staff for keeping us this way. I'm not sure how other districts have gotten that way, but there's a significant number, and I just appreciate where we are. Next item on the agenda, naming of Village of West Point area elementary school. So we've had this on the agenda for several months. Sometimes it's been a tradition on this board to ensure that all seven of us are here and helping to make that decision. We haven't had to hurry up and do this. So we've pushed it on, and here we are. We are looking at 6 school nominations. There's been plenty of time to look at them. I do know that the nominations are actually written up. Yeah, I'm sure you've already read them in board docs in a previous meeting. And then we have a paper copy of nominee number 4 in this blue folder. So if you will look at that. Ms. Chumley, did you have
No,
something?
that was it. I was just going to apologize. I had called Monica with the name, and then life just got in the way with me getting everything put together, and so Monica and Gerald helped me on that. So so paper copies at your desk in a separate folder.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chumley. So we've had our discussion and come to a conclusion with a school namesake in a number of different ways. We do have, again, as you see, 6 nominations. I have a suggestion, and then we can discuss it from there, whether we want to adopt that or go forward with it. But my suggestion is we go from one side of the bench to the other and list your top choice. And then at that point, have the opportunity to discuss your nominee. We could eliminate, I guess is what I'm thinking. We could go and yes, Mr. Blunt.
Is anybody's opening?
Yeah, the word file's having a little trouble. Did y'all get open?
I'm sorry?
Did y'all get the Word file open?
I did.
Y'all got yours open?
Maybe it's on this end of the table.
Yeah, mine's,
Y'all are cursed down there?
no, Carol's didn't open either.
Press at the bottom where it
Yeah, open, yeah.
gives you.
Yeah,
Just zoom in.
yeah, see, mine's not opening.
We can go make a copy if we need to.
We may need to.
No, there's another way. Save it first and then open it. Don't do it that way. Yeah, let me see.
Okay, so show me what I'm,
Or maybe we could share, I don't know.
And then Sid do
You're
save.
okay? You have it?
oh, and then open there, and then I'll allow. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so the 6 names are in front of you and nomination number 1. So I'll go back to what I was thinking about, is that we would start at one side of the bench, list your top choice, go to the other side, and then from there we could perhaps discuss the top 2, top 3, or however it all comes out. Any thoughts on that?
Can we just do top 2 and then just go from there?
We can. Anybody?
You said if we did we did our 1, and then we would speak about it, so if you,
Well,
2, you would want us to speak about.
I guess we could decide what it is that it looks like as we go down. I was thinking of top one, we could do top two, and then see what numbers we have, and then have the opportunity to discuss. So what is this board's pleasure?
I think you're going to end up with, even if you do the top two, I think you'll end up with one.
I don't know that, so what would you, I mean,
We have the choice of just doing one or doing two, and it still could come out the same way, so.
okay, so as you're saying, as if I start with you, you have the option of naming one or naming two. Is that correct?
And talking to both at that time, or just?
No, not at that time.
Great.
Let's just go down, and then see what we have, and then discuss if that's okay.
Okay.
Does that make
you want
sense?
us- Cause this is Corinne's first time, so we don't say names,
Thank you for,
and so we
That,
say
Carol?
numbers, and so, and any other code talking we wanna do. about the names.
after we go with the numbers, if you want to see something in favor of someone, please try not to give any, as much as you can.
Yeah.
Don't try to identify the person.
I do have a question before we start. Can we ever take a school that has Valley High? Can we ever take a school like that and make the comment, can we rename Valley High after person 3, person 4?
So I am going to make mention of, I'm going to say that, and anybody else can interject. So this board in the past, a long time ago in the past, has taken a school and changed its name. But I think the idea to do it here, I mean, there's a process involved in that. It's involving the community, and so it's a process.
So you're saying you prefer we don't do that?
Well, we actually
do it
can't
tonight.
tonight.
No, I'm saying, I'm just saying in general, is that ever done? It
It's
has been done before, okay.
it's
In
been
the
a while.
past, the time that we did it, Corinne, it came from the community too. And I'm thinking of Alan. I can't remember what Alan was prior.
That was
but-
the last one we did.
But Lackland City, but it came from the community asking us to do that.
I would suggest that I would be hesitant to do that, even if it were possible on this agenda, without some community feedback.
So a relatively long process. And of course, not everybody agrees, right? So it's like one of those types of decisions that we make. Sometimes not everybody's with us, but we could do that. But yeah, not right now. All right, Dr. Harrell, and I'm gonna try to tally y'all. Keep me straight. Okay, thank you.
All right, so, I'm going to, recommend, or my nominee is number 2, although I have loved each one, and I like the new one that was just submitted, True Champions, right? Two champions for kids and for, education, but I'll stick with number 2 right now. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Saldana,
2,
Mr. Medina,
2.
Mr. Lopez,
4.
Ms. Chumley,
2 and 4.
Mr. Blunt.
2.
And Karen is 2. So we obviously have, 1, 2, 3. We have 5 of us that have supported 2, and then,
6.
oh, I'm sorry, thank you. 6 of us who have supported 2, and 2 people have supported 4, and you can see that. So this board's pleasure, you want to talk about it? It looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that have just 2, and then one person with 4 and one person with 2 and 4.
But everyone chose 2, so I'm wondering if the
Yeah.
2 that chose 2 talk about.
The 2 that chose 4?
Although I don't know it'll make a difference, I just feel it's important to say something if you want.
Right.
to
Okay.
honor that.
Thank you. Ms. Chumley? Did you?
I thought it was important to include that individual's name in this. When I went back and looked at some of our namesakes, I think that there are some things that were accomplished over a very, very long career within the school district, and I've looked at with some of our other namesakes, and I thought it was important that that individual be included in the list and at least recognized on that. So, but I absolutely am fine. That's why I put 2 and 4 as well. You know, I always give Dr. Woods credit that when we're talking about an individual, that we look at their total book. And I think that we're all human and we all have our own idiosyncrasies. But I think that it's important that we look at what an individual has done and given and accomplished over a very long period of time. And so that's why I'm really comfortable with 2 as well. But I did just think it important to honor number 4 for just the amount of time and some real positives throughout that period as well that were accomplished. Again, looking at the full scope of an individual's time with us.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Blunt?
I just realized for his historical sake, y'all tell me if I got it right, I think 1 through 5 have previously been submitted. I think the only new one we have for this time period, unless I'm wrong, is number 6. So I wasn't sure if,
I don't remember number 1. Was number 1?
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Number 2 has not been nominated before this one.
Was 3?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good point. My
Was-
bad. Good point.
Was 3 nominated before?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why
Yeah.
I missed that.
I know that the last 3 were, and they were all honorable, incredible.
I just bringing that up so historically. That's all. Nothing else.
Thank you for that. No, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Is there a motion to come before the board for any of our nominees here? Dr. Harrell?
Hello. I move that we nominate number 2 as the namesake for Village at West Point North area.
Second.
Before we go forward, do we have another, I'm not sure how to do this, but is there another nominee? Should we call for another nominee or just vote? Should we just vote?
I don't think you,
Okay.
yeah, you'd have to amend it or something. Yeah, you can't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
'cause-
yeah, because you already got a
Right
motion.
now, you've got a motion on the
Yeah.
floor,
And a second.
Yeah.
and
I get confused how we do this with our officers and our, okay, thank
on
you.
nominations, you usually don't have to have a second. You just open nominations and take however many and then vote. But I think you've got a motion on the floor.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to, for nominee number 2 to be the school namesake for Village of West Point Area Elementary School. All those in favor, just please raise your hand. Okay, we have a vote of 7 in favor of nominee. So our school namesake for nomination for Village of West Point, I'm proud to say, is Miss Katie Ann Reed. So that's really exciting. And as we go into executive session, nobody text her. When we go into put your phone down, Dr. Barras. Right, okay. All right, I think, does that close this agenda? Right, okay. So, the Board of Trustees on April 12th, beginning at, let's take a brief recess for maybe 10 minutes.
Leave that long, because only one item.
Only one.
It's only
Yeah,
one
we're
item.
going to stay in here, but we still have to call. Well, I know, but then we have to call Ms. Reed.
Okay. Yeah, we got time, yeah. Should-
Okay,
should be all right.
so, okay, all right.
Staffer forbid.
5 minutes.
Katie Reed.
Let's say at 7:30. Okay, are we ready? We on? Okay. All right, the Board of Trustees on April 12th, beginning at 7:40 p.m. will convene an open meeting. Action will take place on the appointment of Director of Governmental Relations. Is there a motion?
I move approval as discussed in closed session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the appointment of Director of Governmental Relations. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. And the board ended its meeting at 7:41 p.m. on April 12th, 2022. Okay.
Team call.
All right. What? Oh.
Y'all wanna, we got a phone with us.
Oh, yeah, sure.